In the meantime, I want to introduce our next speaker. Professor Ivan Sascha Sheehan is the Executive Director of the School of Public and International Affairs at the University of Baltimore. And more importantly, and just perhaps for those of you who would be interested, he's the author of numerous articles regarding U.S. policy on Iran, and he has been a tried and true friend of the NCRI, a supporter of the organization, and I'm delighted to welcome him here this morning.
Well, thank you so much, Ambassador, and welcome to all of you. What an honor it is to join such a distinguished panel of speakers for this very timely forum today. As I was preparing to speak to you this morning, I was reminded of a story involving the man for whom this building was named, the great statesman from Illinois, Senator Everett Dirksen. In his efforts to secure passage of the 1964 Civil Rights Act, Senator Dirksen is credited with remarking that, quote, "There's nothing more powerful than an idea whose time has come." At the vote prior to passage of this most important legislation that was meant to guarantee the cause of freedom in this country, legislation that was meant to perfect this union, he declared that, quote, "The time has come for equality of opportunity in the sharing of government and in education and in employment. It must be," he said, "not stayed or denied." Well, today I join you at another defining moment in history to speak about an idea whose time has come, the cause of freedom and democracy in Iran. This week we commemorated the 40th anniversary of the Iran hostage crisis, and in so doing, we marked 4 consecutive decades of terrorism and repression in the Islamic Republic. We've watched as the regime's agents and allies have engaged in domestic repression, regional belligerence, and global hostilities. We've witnessed hostage takings and proxy violence. We've seen arms shipments and the export of fundamentalism. But through it all, for 4 decades, the U.S. and its allies have regrettably, but repeatedly, failed to address the looming Iran threat or the regime's underlying ideology. As I speak to you today, at least 17 dual nationals are actively being held captive by Iranian authorities. At least 4 American citizens are currently serving 10-year sentences. Most have been charged with espionage or similar national security crimes, but little justification has been offered for these charges. We know that prisoners are often held in Iran under the flimsiest of pretenses. And let's be honest, Iranian authorities have hinted that American prisoners may be released early if the U.S. government is willing to pay a ransom for their release. Ladies and gentlemen, these aren't legitimate prisoners held for good cause. These are pawns in a war waged by Tehran. Now, there are some in Washington who argue that the White House should do whatever is necessary to secure the freedom of falsely imprisoned U.S. citizens. But I would argue that ending the false imprisonment of Americans, challenging the regime's hypocrisy, and addressing Iran's decades-long campaign of hostility will not be achieved through engagement or repeated concessions. This much is clear. Appeasing the Ayatollahs is no recipe for success. Now, in spite of all the reasons the world has come to be concerned, and for all the reasons the world has to be concerned with Tehran's violent arc of influence, nothing compares to the horrors experienced by the Iranian people at the hands of their own rulers. Just as Tehran has taken aim at Western nationals, the plight of Iran's own population has worsened. Amidst the regime's brutal suppression of pro-democracy protests in early 2018, a nationwide uprising that featured citizens calling for a comprehensive change of government, the number of Iranian political prisoners swelled by the thousands. But this isn't all. Mass arrests are a reminder of the Islamic Republic's repeated crimes against humanity, particularly the massacre of 30,000 political prisoners in the summer of 1988. That incident stemmed from a fatwa by the supreme leader who declared that all opponents of the theocratic system were subject to summary execution. Today we know that the main target of this clerical edict was the highly capable opposition organization known as the MEK. But in spite of the fierce persecution, the movement endured and has even thrived in recent decades. This is a topic on which Ambassador Bloomfield, the speaker who you'll hear from in just a short while, and I have written extensively. Last year, the MEK was credited with leading the countrywide anti-regime protests that swept over Iran, giving voice to the people's progressive aspirations. Nevertheless, Khomeini's fatwa remains in effect today, and political prisoners have been executed for actual or perceived support of the MEK. And I should note that capture and kill operations have even been extended to the United States homeland. Although Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei acknowledged the MEK's role in the uprising, he also blamed the protest on a, quote, triangle of enemies in Washington, Tel Aviv, and Riyadh. This reflects a long-standing strategy of conflating foreign and domestic opposition to the clerical regime in hopes of directing or conflating both trends as one. Ladies and gentlemen, the discontent on the Iranian street demonstrates that there is no need for Western powers to actively pursue regime change. The Iranian people will be the architects of the next Iranian Revolution. That said, the United States and its allies should endeavor to promote an alternative vision for Iran's future, and they should offer moral encouragement and support to the Iranian opposition. This summer, I had the rare opportunity of joining a bipartisan delegation of senior U.S. officials at Ashraf 3, the MEK's new home in Albania. During our trip, we gathered firsthand insights that led us to conclude what scholars have long understood, but policymakers have been reluctant to acknowledge. And that is that Iran fears its own people more than it does regional or global powers. What we witnessed together was eye-opening and deeply promising. A cohesive, organized political opposition movement with a long history of struggle against fundamentalism and dictatorship, guided by a gifted female leadership and with a well-defined political platform, and an intricate network of passionate supporters inside Iran and across the world, eager to topple the regime from within. It was like looking into Iran's pluralistic and democratic future. Our U.S. delegation included four-star generals, Democrats, Republicans, independents, liberals, conservatives, foreign policy experts, sitting members of Congress, former cabinet officials, ambassadors, intelligence experts, military officers, governors, academics, and noted human rights advocates. While in Albania, we encountered evidence of both horrific acts of tyranny and valiant acts of resistance. Our observations constitute a body of evidence and opinions that regrettably are too often excluded from the parochial view of Iranian politics in this city. For decades, Washington has treated Iran as a fixture of the Middle East landscape while ignoring the most critical aspect of an effective policy toward Iran, and that is the Iranian people themselves. I'm currently putting the finishing touches on a book that chronicles what we in the U.S. delegation saw firsthand when we traveled to Albania, and I expect that this new book will be released in the coming weeks. The book challenges the false narratives peddled by Tehran. It examines the opposition's call for a democratic future, and it outlines the implications for a more effective strategy toward the Iran. Ladies and gentlemen, at the top of my remarks today, I noted that there are times in history when an idea's time has come. We've reached such a moment. Putting an end to the Iranian regime's repression, putting an end to the meddling and the terrorism, means giving voice to the Iranian people's aspirations for freedom. And there's no better way to do this than by standing with the only viable alternative to clerical rule, the Iranian opposition and the Iranian people they represent. Thank you so much.